What is going on, guys? My name is FMJ, and for this video today, I'm going to be reading you guys my essay that I wrote for my history class for my junior project, which is this year. I am a junior in high school, and we had to choose a topic that made an impact on American history, and I chose violent video games and their effects on children of this generation. So let's get started. Oh, actually, before I get started, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm still a little sick, so if I'm breathing a little bit in excess or heavily, I apologize, and if my voice sounds strange, I also apologize, but there's nothing I can really do about it. So let's get started. Violent video games. Evil or beneficial? Video games have always been a popular activity among children ever since the launch of Pong on the Atari gaming console in 1976. Over time, video games have become more and more popular due to the increase in the level of engagement that the developers have introduced by advancing the visual graphics and overall aesthetics of the gaming experience. Not only have the game developers made their products extremely realistic, but over time, the games became much more violent as well. Violent video games were a smash hit with almost everybody from the very beginning, and although some parents may not have approved, there was no denying the fact that the games kept their children occupied for hours on end. Scientists and politicians have, on many occasions, pointed to the amount of killing, drugs, and sex that is implemented within video games nowadays as a supposed trigger for random acts of violence in kids who play these video games religiously. Despite the fact that there may be a potential link between the level of violence in children and violent video games themselves, many would argue that in some relatively recent cases, people are hastily making inaccurate assumptions by pointing fingers, blaming the viciousness within these video games without proper studies or evidence to support it. Video games could be desensitizing killing and drug usage to the kids of the current generation and have a strong potential to be a trigger for random acts of violence across the globe. Is there any truth behind these claims, or are they nothing but shams? Ask a child who plays violent video games if he or she believes that the excessive amounts of ferocity within these games have affected his or her own personal levels of violence, and the answer will more than likely be no. Unfortunately, data from scientific studies show otherwise. Children are able to easily acquire violent video games regardless of the fact that there are age restrictions for the purchasing of video games that contain violent content. A company named Entertainment Software Association established a rating system for video games in the year 1994. This particular rating system became known as the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Rating Board. The reasoning behind the creation of this rating system for games was established due to the major criticism of violent content that could be found in games such as Doom and Mortal Kombat. Similar to the rating system of movies, the ESRB rates games based on the content within them. The ratings range anywhere from the company's early childhood rating all the way to the adult-only rating. A majority of the violent video games that are being obtained by teens are usually rated M for mature. This particular rating requires the consumer who is purchasing the game to be the age of 17 or above. There is one major loophole in this system though. If a child is under the age of 17 and wants to purchase a game that has received an ESRB rating of M for mature, as long as there is a parent who is present at the time of the game's purchasing, minors can acquire these games with ease. This serves as a major issue because parents are often unaware of the meaning of the ESRB rating system and the inappropriate content within these video games in general. Once these video games are in the hands of underage children, the players can easily become addicted. What makes these games so addicting is that kids who play a steady amount of video games find that the game is extremely rewarding and also allows them to access a secondary world, helping them escape reality. Some children have even claimed that they find in-game shopping, in-game missions, and in-game sex or love lives to be more satisfying than real life. Also, violence is cool. Video games provide an experience that allows children and teens to commit acts of violence without receiving the criminal consequences in the real world. Are there any positive factors that lie within video game playing, or is it an unhealthy activity causing children to become isolated from the real world and consumed by a virtual one? It may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but there are actually quite a few things linked to video game playing that are considered to be advantageous and helpful to children when it comes to the real world. Video games constantly keep the player involved in the experience. This forces the player to be ready for any and every possible situation and has the potential to improve this skill in real-life situations as well. It was also found in a study that children who play video games in copious amounts were able to answer logic questions, react to hand-eye coordination activities, and process basic instructions to simple tasks more efficiently in comparison to children who did not play video games. A common argument that is made by those who are against video games is that it causes the player to become antisocial. Although this may have been a valid argument back when the gaming industry was first beginning to rise, data from a 2008 study shows otherwise. A survey was taken among groups of children who play video games, and it actually turns out that when gaming, 60% of kids are actually interacting with friends, family, or even random people that are met over online matchmaking. Another advantageous skill that many gamers have acquired from their online experiences is an improvement in verbal communication skills. When playing an online multiplayer video game, most games allow you to use a microphone, which allows the player to communicate with their friends and strangers. Alongside being able to communicate with people across the country, video games have provided a popular topic to discuss with friends. Unfortunately, not all side effects given off from video games are healthy. Excessive video game playing may be fun, but moderation is key. Obesity is often associated with the image of a gamer. While video games are not directly linked to making children fat, they can definitely play a part in doing so. Playing video games in excess requires the player to sit still for hours on end. This reduces the amount of exercise that is being done throughout the child's day. Even though in some sense, video games could make someone fat, theoretically anything that requires somebody to sit still hour after hour could be linked to obesity. This is not the only reason that video games contribute to obesity. Over the years, video game developers have been partnering with food companies such as Doritos and Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew Game Fuel is a limited flavor that is released alongside widely distributed video game titles such as Halo, World of Warcraft, and the Call of Duty franchise. Not only are these flavors limited, but they give the players of these games an incentive to purchase the product by including codes under the caps of the bottle for a set time of in-game XP, experience points, which helps the player level up twice as fast. Doritos did a similar campaign with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 in 2011 as well. This is not necessarily a problem, but it is undeniable that there are people who buy these products in rather large quantities because of the XP that is being offered. This is a major example of the gaming industry promoting unhealthy eating, which can very easily lead to obesity when combined with the action of sitting down all day to play a video game. Aside from obesity, there are also other negative effects that video games have the potential to bring onto excessive players. When playing video games, you are more than likely using a controller of some sort. Most games require you to repeat the same button patterns over and over, which may seem harmless, but in the long run, it can lead to painful muscular disorders such as carpal tunnel, a condition in which there is an immense amount of pressure on the median nerve in your wrist, making it painful to use your hand. Different types of people perceive video games in many different ways. Some may portray them as being the root of all evil, while others make the claim that gaming is a healthy side hobby within a child's life that can help with various skills in the real world. The content within today's video games are without a doubt very violent, but there seems to be a gray area as to whether or not excessive gaming can directly contribute to an increase in a child's level of violence. Children who play a lot of video games were found to have parents who were ignorant when it came to gaming and the amount of violence that are within the games. With this, parents do not see a problem, so they allow their kids to play as much as they want because it keeps them occupied for extended periods of time. Studies have revealed that teens who play more than 13 hours of video games a week had a tendency to be more aggressive, had more teacher confrontations, took part in fights at school, and had lower grade point averages when compared to children who did not play video games. Also, it was found that there was a 10.5% bullying rate in teens who play 15 or more hours of video games per week. This is a percentage that is massive in comparison to the 1.4% bullying rate in those who play less than 1 hour per week. Criminal behavior was also surprisingly high in those who played violent video games. According to this study, violent video game players generally took part in more illegal and unacceptable actions such as damaging property and threatening peers. In fact, the overall crime rate in children, both males and females, has spiked dramatically ever since violent video games have become extremely popular. Although video games are the main focus in these particular studies, there is undeniable potential for other factors that may contribute to these increases in violence, such as movies. There is no doubt that violent movies can also play a potential role in increasing the level of violence in children, but video games present violence in a whole different way than movies do. When you watch a movie, you are strictly watching somebody else committing an act of violence, such as killing another human. In video games, the experience actually puts a gun in the hands of the player, allowing them to actually shoot at others in the game, and has the possibility to be linked to the desensitization of killing in children. Although the overall levels of anger and violence in kids who play video games are shown to be much higher than those who do not play, does not necessarily mean that these violent traits are coming strictly from the gameplay. There are definitely other potential contributing factors such as poor parenting and violent movies and television shows. One of the main arguments that is made by those who are against violent video games is the fact that many people who have been involved in recent massacres, such as the Virginia Tech shooting, have played video games. Violent video games could have a definite impact on the choices made by the shooters, but has this theory become a go-to reasoning for people? James Holmes, the shooter of the Dark Knight Rises massacre in July of 2012, was said to have been addicted to a video game called Guitar Hero. The general concept of this video game is to hit the correct buttons in the correct order as they appear on the screen. Many journalists confidently claimed that Guitar Hero was the reason for the criminal actions that James Holmes took part in. This left readers of the articles confused due to the fact that Guitar Hero contains absolutely no violence whatsoever in it. Is the media just looking for things to point for the reasoning behind these massacres due to a lack of legitimate reasoning? This is definitely a possibility, but there is no way to prove it for sure. For the most part, whether or not video games are a contributing factor to random acts of violence is a blur. All in all, whether or not video games make the children of this generation more violent than they should be is something that could be debated for eternity. Many will argue that they are helpful in terms of helping kids learn, follow directions, and socializing. Others will argue that these games are causing isolation among the youth, claiming that it can cause anti-socialism, obesity, and an increase in violent/criminal activity. It all depends on what your personal views are, but the arguments made by those who are against violent video games tend to be stronger than the ones made by the people who believe video games are a positive influence. In my personal experience as a gamer myself, I have definitely noticed an increase in shortness of temper and patience ever since I started playing video games in copious amounts, but never has it crossed my mind for me to take part in a major criminal act of violence. If anything, playing video games has helped me. I am partnered with an online network named Yoush, which places advertisements on my YouTube videos, which consist heavily of video game content coincided with a voiceover that I overlay onto the gameplay. This has enabled me to make an income from doing something that I enjoy, as well as allowing me to interact with people who are fans of my videos. In conclusion, I don't think that video games are the direct cause for increased violence. Rather, it is a mixture of things that cause it, such as poor parenting and a mind that is easily manipulated or influenced by repetitive actions.